I was leaving for the United States, where I worked, after a 2-week vigil by my mother's bedside in a hospital in Bhubaneswar, Orissa. She had suffered a near fatal stroke. She was neither getting better nor moving on. My weight was not helping. So her last born, thought it was time to get back to work. On my way to the airport, I decided to stop by at the hospital one last time. An airy midday quiet hung around the government hospital, walking past listless cows and a couple of resident stray dogs in the compound. I entered her room. She lay on the bed just like the night before, quiet and unmoving. I held her hand in my palms. After a few minutes, as I bent to kiss her forehead, wrinkled with age but still beautiful, she asked me in a garbled voice, "Chumu kheo?" I held her hand in my palms. After a few minutes, as I bent to kiss her forehead, wrinkled with age but still beautiful, she asked me in a garbled voice, "Chumu keno khachu?" Why are you kissing me? "Khabuna keno? Why not?" I asked. She replied simply, "Jao, jogotta ke chumu khao. Go, kiss the world." They were my blind mother's last words to me, and they became the guiding principle of my life. The night-long vigil of the lone kerosene lantern in the room had blackened the top of its glass with soot. Around its flicker, Makhan Gopal Bagchi and his 4 sons, the eldest 14, followed by a 13, 12, and 3-year-old, sat huddled under the tiled roof of the small government quarter they lived in. From the adjoining room came the sounds of groaning. Lavanya Prova Bagchi had cooked, cleaned, and kept house for her husband and 4 sons till this day, when she had gone into labor. Outside the house, beyond the community well that served the needs of the few families in adjoining government quarters and the under trials of the nearby police lockup, it was still dark. Patnagar, a small sub-divisional town of 5,000 people, seasonally cut off from the world by a river without an all-weather bridge, did not have a hospital for the non-gazetted Tehsildar, who was now expecting his 5th child. Anxiety was mounting, while it was commonplace for childbirth at home in places like Patnagar. He was not sure his wife would make it through this one without medical help. The family's only hope in case of an emergency was Dr. S.K. Mitra and his wife Manorama, an erstwhile lady health visitor. The couple lived half a kilometer away. He was not sure whether to send one of his sons to wake them up. He should wait some more, he thought, before disturbing the doctor, but with the groans becoming unbearable, he finally made up his mind. "Go, call Mittir Meshumoshai," he told the eldest boy. After the Second World War, certain categories of medical professionals had been retrained so that they could become practicing doctors. Armed with a medical license, Captain S.K. Mitra had come all the way from the war to settle in Patnagar, then under the rule of the king of Bolangir. Here he had met Manorama, a Christian lady from Maharashtra, who had come there to work as the only lady health visitor. The two had fallen in love, married, and settled down to serve the small community. She was the only woman who could speak English. It had earned her the name Memsahib Mashima. Among the 4 boys, the Mitras were not just doctors. They were like family. In the small town that was Patnagar, everyone was keen to everyone else. The Mitras made little money, would charge nothing for emergencies like these, and were always at hand. The boy ran through the darkness. Mitir Mishumoshai's house seemed really far. Finally, he reached, and after a breathless conversation, the doctor accompanied the young boy. The doctor's arrival meant some relief. While all one could do was wait, there was now hope that it would all end well. But even as Dr. Mitra tended to Lavanya, the mourning did not decrease. After some time, Dr. Mitra opened the door and asked that his wife he be called. It wasn't possible for him to handle the. After some time, Dr. Mitra opened the door and asked that his wife be called. It wasn't possible for him to handle the situation by himself. Again, the boy ran. This time dawn was breaking. The night sky softly illuminated. He had just passed his matriculation examination from the local Romai High School, named after an erstwhile king of Bolangir. With a first class, he had become the second student to get a first class from the vernacular school. With school over, he was waiting to go to Ravenshaw College in faraway Cuttack in a few days' time. The journey to Cuttack would mean a 40-kilometer, 3-hour bus ride that would take him to Sambalpur, then an overnight bus to the sleepy railhead of Meramandali awaited him. There, the Talcher passenger came once a day to take people all the way to Cuttack. The entire journey would take him nearly 24 hours, but right now, Memshai Mashima's house seemed further than that. He ran as fast as he could, and after what seemed an eternity, was finally banging on her door. Memshai Mashima rushed, half walking, half running. Just as she stepped onto the veranda, the groaning abruptly stopped, and the full-throated cries of a newborn burst in through the house. My mother always told me I was born just when the big red sun emerged in the east and burst forth into a new day. I love this sheer imagery every time the story of my birth crosses my mind. My earliest memory of my childhood is when I was a 3-year-old. From then till today, I have watched myself grow up with the keenness of a photographer. Life becomes fascinating if we observe it even as we are living it. As I trawl through the archives of my life, I find an interesting path emerging. It curves twice, once in the beginning of my 20s, the other when I entered my 40s. As I look around and see the lives of countless young professionals, doctors, engineers, policemen, teachers, I find the same sharp curves, each life divided into 3 distinct phases. In part 1 of the book, you will live and hopefully love my early years. You will see how character and values get imprinted in child's mind, how displacement creates self-confidence, and what a magical difference mentoring can make at any stage of our lives. Experience the joy that is childhood, a wonderful gift that need never be left behind. I treasure my childhood, for if I forget it, the child in me will die. In part 2, you will explore the making of a young professional who, like everyone else, wanted to be someone. It is a familiar phase with its many ups and downs, during which we realize the dissonance between the romance of youth and the reality of workplace. Though, with some perspective and a certain mindset, they can be aligned. I started my working life as a clerk in a government office and finally ended up co-founding MindTree, India's first venture-funded IT services company to get publicly listed. At the source of a river, we have no idea of the path it will take to reach its confluence. Yet, I meet countless young professionals anxious about picking the right job and the right company. Over planning their careers, their usual refrain is, how will this job help me in my career? But who on earth truly knows? In their anxiety to carve the perfect path, chanting, what will I be? What will I be? They overlook the importance of the smallest of the jobs and forget that in our early lives, the job in itself is immaterial. What is material is the work ethic we build. Your first, the second, and even perhaps the third job will not build or define your career. The respect, patience, affection, and gratitude with which you treat them will. In part 3, I take you on the journey of my 40s, even as it continues to unfold to show you how I fell and got up and how I learned from people who have been there before me. For a successful professional, the decade of the 40s becomes a defining period. It is a time that can almost be compared to a salt camp, where preparations are made before climbing the final peak. It is alluring and ruthless in its ability to weed out most contenders while pushing up the chosen one. This seldom happens in slow motion. Before you realize it, the outcome is staring you in the face. There is little one can do to rewind and reconsider choices, something life allows you when you are in your 20s. In this phase of life's journey, unless one handles oneself with contemplation and care, the precipice and not the pinnacle becomes the destination. I have seen countless overachievers who come up to this point and then must leave the professional journey of their choice. Before you read on, I have two more things to tell you. The nature of the narrative requires that I constantly speak to you in the first person. Yet my life has not been only about me, myself, and I. Without people around me, without their affection and warmth, I would not last even for a day. So while my narrative requires me to use a lot of the I, you must discount its character, focusing instead on the journey and its lessons. Second, I have been candid and forthcoming about my life experiences, the only exception being my relationship with my wife, Shushmita. She grew up with me and has been an abiding influence on my professional career. Seldom can one reach the top without enlisting the support of a loved one. I cannot imagine where I would be today if she had not been by my side since she was 15. Ever since, she has remained my rock of Gibraltar. However, to honor her wishes, I have kept our personal relationship outside the purview of this book. Your life is a beautiful gift, unique to yourself. There is no other person in this universe quite like you, which is why my life story itself is not important. The important thing is what you take away from it. Even as you find some of my lessons interesting or useful, what really matters is how they led you to your own reflection and your own life lessons. Nothing works better than that and more than just living your life. The capacity to behold it is even more beautiful.